Hello everyone, it's Refresh, and I'm here to take a look at the Planeswalker deck for Tezzeret, Master of Metal from Aether Revolt. According to the back, you have a ready-to-play 60-card deck featuring a foil premium Tezzeret, Master of Metal Planeswalker card, 2 Aether Revolt 15-card booster packs, a strategy insert, and a magic quick reference card. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. Alright, here's the Tezzeret Planeswalker card. It is shiny. Just a little bit of bending in the surface. Here's a deck box with the contents of everything else, I believe. Let's go ahead and open it. Inside we have the deck. We have 2 Aether Revolt booster packs that are a little bit squished. We have a quick reference guide, as promised. It's not much to it. It tells you how to set up a game and how to play the different parts of the turn, and then a little bit of information on how to read a card and what it takes to cast a spell. And an ad for Magic Duels, which is perforated, so it looks like you can tear that off, but I don't understand why it would be like that. This thing is not terribly useful for anyone that's played the game for a little bit, but I guess if you haven't played the game before and this is the very first thing that you're picking up, it could be helpful. It's still very scant on information though, so I don't know what they are trying to do here. I'd rather just have them have a link to a video on how to play the game or something like that. We also have the informational guide here. It tells you a little bit about the character and the deck. It gives you 3 paragraphs on how to play the deck, and it gives you the general sense that this is an improvised deck which uses a bunch of artifacts to build up the game, but it doesn't really go very deeply into what the different cards are used for and why, and so you have all of these different cards without any instruction on really what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, and why the different cards are in here, which would give you a better idea of how you could improve the deck. But they give you some very, very simple instructions on how to boost the deck, and it's not terribly instructive. Like, it doesn't tell you what kind of cards you're actually looking for, just to be aware of how things cost and what colors to take. So not the most useful thing, but there's the deck list. And on the back, you have a little bit more information about who Tezzeret is, and then some advertisements. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have inside. One of our rares is the Merchant's Dockhand, which is kind of a disappointing rare as far as rares go. There's also a Quicksmith Spy, which might be a little bit better, even though it's kind of a weird card. Then we have Tezzeret's signature card, which is a Tezzeret's Betrayal. You destroy a target creature, search for Tezzeret, and put it into your hand. It's pretty powerful for a casual card that's just playing this deck against other such decks. You get to destroy a creature and you get a card to your hand, so that's pretty good. It's a 2 for 1. You have another Tezzeret card here. This is a 2/3 for 3 that you can tap to make your opponent lose a life, but if you have Tezzeret, your opponent loses 3 life. It's not the most exciting card, but it's okay. It looks like the Pendulum of Patterns might be Tezzeret's common card, which gets you a bunch of life and then you can sack it to draw a card. It's not the most exciting thing, but again, if this is an improvised deck, then maybe it has a purpose in here. And of course you get Tezzeret's Touch, which is a Tezzeret specific card. Not specific to the deck, but it has its name on it, so of course you want it in there. That's the deck. I'm going to sleeve these up and play it against the Ajani Planeswalker deck, and I'll be back with some thoughts on how it plays. So I've had a chance to play this deck against its partner deck in Ajani and a few challenge decks, and I have some observations. First of all, I think that this deck actually works quite well together. Its theme is getting benefit off of artifacts, whether it's improvised, which is the signature mechanic that's held by this deck, or just by having advantages given if you control an artifact, like the Dund Operative getting Death Touch and +1/+0 when you control an artifact. And I think this deck works very well to implement that by making sure you have plenty of artifacts that are in the low casting cost range to help you power out the cards that are in the higher casting cost range. And there are some questions here as why certain artifacts are here, or why there is a single essence extraction. It's kind of a weird removal spell compared to everything else that's going on in this deck. And I understand part of that is just because you need to have some kind of removal in the deck, and your 2 Tezzeret's Betrayals, powerful as they are, they're not as ingrained into the theme. They are powerful, I kind of like that they're powerful, but again, I feel like because the rest of the deck is doing things so well, these removal spells don't really feel like they are as integrated into what this deck is trying to do. Now, if Tezzeret's Betrayal had a lot more to do with what Tezzeret himself was doing, for example, causing your opponent to lose life, getting you more artifacts, or taking over your opponent's creatures and or artifacts, then maybe I think it might have been a stronger spell. But as it is, I feel like it's just thematically a little disappointing compared to what everything else that this deck is trying to do. Now, I do think that the curve is a little odd in that you don't really have much in terms of creature weight at the low drop slot, and so it almost feels like this deck's trying to be controlling, or I guess a ramp deck, but it doesn't have a whole lot to do in terms of controlling the board until you're able to play these bigger creatures and hopefully play them faster than your opponent can play creatures of equal size. It is weird that you have a Dakara P-Foul here, for example, instead of at least another Foundry Assembler, so that you can get a little bit bigger faster, and I feel like the weight of the deck is a little uneven. I understand that you have a bunch of artifacts that have later used that can be used earlier in order to do things here, and I do especially like the Tezzeret's Touch being put in here to make these artifacts into creatures. In some sense that makes them creatures as well, at a surprisingly good rate, with additional utility. However, I almost wish that some of these cards were a little bit adjusted in terms of where they sit on the curve. I think the most disappointing card in this deck is actually Merchant's Dockhand. Now, I understand that it is powerful, but I feel like that it's not an especially easy card to understand the advantage of. And so the fact that it takes up a rare slot is a little bit disappointing, and I kind of wish that there was something a little bit more impactful and immediately eye-catching as far as an effect that it has on the board. Otherwise, it's just a 1/2 for 1 for most of the game until you have enough artifacts, and then sometimes when you have 4 mana open and you're not busy, trying to stay alive or finish your opponent, then maybe you can look for a card. But this deck isn't really the kind of controlling, play on your opponent's turn, see what they're going to do. There's no counter spells here or anything like that, and so I don't even feel like it does that well. And as such, I feel like it's kind of disappointing that one of the marquee cards in the deck, one of the few rares that are here, is that card in particular. The Quicksmith Spy is a much better example of the kind of card that you want in this deck. It says right there, you draw a card as long as you control that artifact and Quicksmith Spy, and that artifact, which it might have been doing nothing, like the Pendulum Patterns or the Universal Solvent or the Implemented Examination, suddenly can just be tapped to draw you cards as long as you have this creature. And that is a much better example of something that feels more powerful, that does something immediately. And I would have gladly traded that Merchant's Dockhand for another Quicksmith Spy. My complaints about this deck are limited to just the fact that the removal feels off theme, and that Merchant's Dockhand is really kind of a waste of a rare. But otherwise, I feel like the deck works very well. I do think that its curve is a little wonky, and I think it could have been a little bit better streamlined so that it feels a little better playing. But again, this is an intro deck. It's not supposed to be the best thing in the world. So those are my thoughts about Tezzeret's deck from Aether Revolt. If you have any experience with this deck, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you thought this video was helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.